and welcome to our podcast. I'm Lois.
I'm Jada.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Lydia.
Today we are talking about being in the world, but not of it. So we get this idea from John 17, verses 14 through 16 say, I have given them your word, and the world hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world.
So how do we be in the world but not of it? Hebrews 12, verse 3 tells us to consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. We have to consider him, right? And look to him because he endured the hatred for us so that we could have the hope of heaven. Like, that's just an amazing thought to me. In 1 Peter 2, verse 12, it says, Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. A sojourner is someone who's just passing through. Like, they don't really have a home. They're just on their way somewhere. And that's us. Like, we're just sojourners here in this world.
Is not our
That's
home.
what I was about to sing. I was about to start singing on here.
Yeah, exactly. But
Y'all
you
didn't know we sing too, did you?
No, not on microphone.
maybe next episode I'll convince them.
Lois will leave that to you.
Yeah,
I
stay
got you.
tuned.
Oh,
Stay tuned.
But being in the world looks like abstaining from things that do not reflect his holiness.
Yeah.
Abstaining from the things that the world calls good. Because the world likes to call good evil and evil good. And so abstaining from those things is what it looks like to be in the world, but not of the world.
Okay, so how do we be in the world, but not of the world? I think one thing is, do you spend most of your time with Christians or with the world? Because like 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, evil company corrupts good morals.
And it's a difficult thing because obviously we have to be around the world. We have to go to work and be around those people. So how do we make sure we're still not being of the world while we're surrounded by the world?
We spend so much time with them. I mean, like some of us live with them. Some of us go to school and literally.
Sometimes it's just hard.
Yeah.
Like, it just is really, really hard to be around people of the world.
That's one thing I love about like PTP and stuff like that. Spending a week of your time just with people who have these.
What is PTP?
Oh, I guess I could say that, you know. Yeah. Polishing the Pulpit is a conference for Christians. Yeah. My bad. I just think people live inside my head, I guess.
I remember like being so uplifted from Polishing the Pulpit this year.
PTP.
It's my favorite. Then getting home and back to work and like, back to this.
Yes. It's just
it's so
a completely different life when you're surrounded by people who have the same goal as you and have the same, like, we want to go to heaven. We want to live a life that is like leading us to heaven. But nobody here seems to care about that. Right. Like the people that I spend every day with, I'm just like, do you not see the consequences of your actions? Like,
it's really sad.
It is so sad. It is so sad.
Jesus died for us to have the hope of heaven. So living like him, being in the world, but not of the world, is such a small thing. But I think when we look at day-to-day life, it's so easy to say that, but it's so hard to do sometimes. And it's hard to stay encouraged because it's like, okay, but the people around me, the world around me, my job, I mean, entertainment, social media. I mean, I kind of think it even goes, especially in our world today, it even goes back to like, what are we surrounding ourselves with on social media? Like, who are you following?
Yes. What are you liking?
What are you
Can we
liking?
talk about this? Why so many Christians like posts they should not be liking?
Or sharing.
I'm very passionate about this.
Also now, I've even noticed on Instagram Reels, you can see when someone's liked something. Like it pops up and says liked by
that's a dangerous game.
So you can start to see it. And I was also told this week that actually when you do that, it actually sends those reels to your friends because they think, like, if that's who you're following, then that's, maybe your friends will enjoy this. And so I started getting a lot of stuff like that in my feed. And it's like, some of it is stuff I would never, follow or like. And it's like, that's what's popping up in my For You. But
this is kind of has no relevance, but it does to me. So if somebody is wearing like an Auburn shirt, I won't like the post. That's such a Lois thing to do. I feel like it's supporting. Like I can't support
Yes,
it.
she wouldn't. I had an Instagram post that she wouldn't like because I wasn't wearing Auburn, but someone in the picture was. So she told me I didn't like it because of that.
Look, if you like something, like in my mind, if you like it, you're supporting it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm giving my approval.
I mean,
of
it's
it.
saying I like this.
So that kind of reminds me too of like Romans chapter 1. You know, when Paul is talking about things like he lists all these things like homosexuality, even disobeying parents, like all of these things are listed there. And it's like not only those who do them, but also those who give approval.
Yeah.
Like even if we're not doing the things, but we're approving of the things that people are doing in the world, like it's kind of still the same thing.
Yeah.
For sure. So I kind of got off topic a little bit. Sorry, guys. Had to
But
bring
that was some good discussion.
Because it's true.
little
I don't think
random.
we think about that.
Yeah.
Like small things like that really do.
who you surround yourself with on
Yeah.
social media. I love that idea, Lydia. That's so good.
The reason I say that is because someone had made the point not too long ago, and I mean, this is still on topic, but even sometimes, I mean, I feel like we've gotten so far from spending time face to face with people that we spend so much time in our phone or watching movies. And I remember someone making the point, like, who are your friends? And sometimes it's not even the people you're spending time with face to face or in person physically, but who are like your shows that you're watching.
Yeah.
Like those are your friends. Those are people, and that
It's what you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah,
It's what you're surrounding yourself with.
1533, like evil company corrupts good morals. And if
Company
that's
doesn't
who
have to
you're-
be someone in person.
exactly. Like, I mean, if that's who you're spending most of your time with, and those are the things you're watching and filling your mind with, then it's going to be really hard to be in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah.
The
Because-
world is just like being thrown at us right now.
yeah,
We
full
just-
force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to make sure we're not throwing ourselves at the world too.
So good.
I remember being in high school, and I'm not plugging myself. I'm just being in high school. It was my senior year, and I just felt so like I felt like there was no like now we have a lot of like different Instagram pages, different Facebook pages that we can follow for things that are like that will help us grow in our
But it
in our
hasn't
walk with the
always been
Lord.
that way.
Exactly. And when I was in high school, I remember it was senior year, and I was like, why is there no encouragement? Like, why
Yes.
is there no one on Instagram instead of promoting all of these ungodly things? Like, why isn't there anyone like promoting God, being ambassadors for Christ? So,
I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a great tool we have, and we need to make sure we're using it.
yeah.
Yeah. When I think that goes to like, who am I spending most of my time with?
Yeah.
I mean, it all goes back to that. Because if we're surrounding ourselves with people who are, you know, embodying Christ, who are living like him, then we're able to live out Romans 12 verses 1 and 2 about not being conformed to the world, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds, which is God's word. So if we're transforming our minds with him and we're spending most of our time in the word, then that's what's going to be our guide and our lamp,
Right.
you know, through life.
If we're living for him, then we're not even going to want to put ourselves in that
Yeah.
position.
Yeah.
You're not going to want to put yourself with those people if you go the social media route. Why follow them?
Yeah.
If that's something like, if you're keeping evil company, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
And like you can use that, oh, well, I want to influence them. But you're also risking them really influencing
Well,
you.
you know, have you heard the example or the illustration, I guess, of you're like standing on a chair and there's all these people around you and you're trying to pull all of them up on that chair with you? That's a lot harder to do than it is for that group of people to bring you down with them.
Yeah.
Because it's going to take so much more effort for you to pull them up as one person than it is for a whole group of people to pull you down to what they're doing. And it's easy to get discouraged and be like, okay, everyone's doing these things. If everyone else is doing it, then I don't want to be the one to not do it.
Yeah.
But Jesus was the one, people left him all the time.
Yeah.
Like after he would teach, he would literally lose followers because they just didn't like what he had to say or they didn't like what he did. And like, that's okay. Like if it happened to Jesus, it's going to happen to us
I mean,
too.
think back, like John 17 said, the world hated him. Like, that's not something like, we don't just say like, oh, my stars, I hate that person.
Yeah.
That's a strong word.
It is.
I mean, I think back to like being a kid being taught, like, you don't say you hate your brother.
Right.
Like,
No,
You don't
yeah.
say you hate
shout out
anyone.
to David. When David made me mad, I'd be like, man, I hate you so much, David. I would get in so much trouble. It's a strong word. And
It's a
they
very strong
hated
word.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's why I love words so much, because scripture uses the word hate, not dislike, but hate.
Yes.
And you can only imagine, like, and I mean, we don't have to imagine, we're told in scripture what happened to him and all the horrible
they
things.
spat at him. I mean, literally in his face, hated him to the point of death. Yeah. Kill him. Like, give us Barabbas over Jesus. Jesus did nothing wrong.
Yeah. So who are we living for?
Yeah.
I think we have to remember that. Like, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
What's that saying? Keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true. Because it's easy to get lost and to put things of the world first. Or, you know, I want to be liked and accepted by everyone. So I'll just do these things just this one time. But it's easy to do that over and over again. Because the more you do it, the easier it gets. And it's harder. So staying in the way, staying in the right way.
And have you thought, like, God isn't trying to keep us from pleasure.
Yeah.
He's trying to protect us from pain.
All of his commandments are for our own good.
Yes. You see all these people living these lifestyles and like seeing so many things happen to them. You're like, can they not see? Can they not see the consequences of their actions? And like, even with us, like, we all have things happen in life. We all have struggles, but we have hope. Like, there is literally nothing to compare the hope that we have. Like, I just can't imagine living without the hope of heaven.
Yeah.
That's terrifying to me.
I think sometimes it's easy too to view our Christian journey as a checklist of things that we have to do this. Like, these are the right, God says don't do these things, so I'm not going to do those things. But it's also full of things to do.
Yes.
Like, we can abstain from all the wrong people, but we also should be surrounding ourselves with Christian people. Like, if we're going to put a don't, we have to put a do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm really happy when I'm with y'all. So shout out to all, not to be all like mushy or anything, but like, I'm so thankful for y'all's friendships and how when I am with y'all, I know I'm not with evil company. Yeah. Like, y'all uplift me and encourage me to do the right thing.
Yeah. I don't have to have like my walls up, like being scared of like, what if she makes me uncomfortable? Like, I don't. And that's like amazing.
And it just brings it back to God knows what he's talking about. Like, think about, maybe you prayed for something and you prayed so hard for it and you thought, oh, like, this is what I want. And then it didn't happen. And you realized maybe God was keeping me from something that didn't really need to happen. Like, we just don't even know all that God is doing for us.
And I think another thing, like, when I spend time with all of you or like, I know, I'm going to cry. No, I'm not. I'm not going to cry on this podcast.
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that. Oh, it's gonna happen.
That probably will, but that's my goal.
This episode or like the whole podcast?
No, ever on this podcast.
Ever?
I'm gonna try not to.
You're joking.
I'm gonna try.
I'm gonna remember this.
Hey, if I can do it, you can do it.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Neither of y'all.
If Jada cries, she's gonna look at me and I'm gonna sob.
I guess it depends on what we continue to talk about, because there could be some topics that I will for sure cry, but we're on camera, so
I don't think I'm gonna cry. Yeah. I don't think I will. We'll see.
It's okay.
Anyway,
sorry, that was completely off topic.
Spending time with like all of you and other Christians, I find myself reflecting those aspects. And I think a lot of times, like, I mean, what we are in love with, what we surround ourselves with is what we're going to reflect. And a lot of times, like, if you think about it, sometimes we're reflecting things that God has told us not to love, and we're reflecting things that sent Christ to the cross.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That's so true. I mean, that kind of goes to 1 John 2 and verse 15 that says, do not love the world or the things in the world, because if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Yeah. I mean, it's right there.
Another shout out to PTP. But I mean, polishing the pulpit. Let me go ahead. I feel like at this point,
anytime PTP said, it's going to be polishing the pulpit. We'll just give that disclaimer.
There's probably going to be many references. But Don Blackwell, shout out to Don Blackwell. But he said, how dare we be entertained by the things that sent Jesus to the cross?
Yeah. Oh, that was such a good point.
That is one of the things that just made me sit there and think, wow, like that really puts you into perspective.
Yeah. Yes. Especially when you know the truth, like you know everything. Yes. Yeah. And we still continue to do these things.
Because we laugh at it. Yeah. Like, it's sin becomes funny. It becomes something that, you know, we watch these movies and it's like, oh, it's just a movie. It's just a book. I've heard so many people say, like, I can get past the language because the story's good. Or I can get past that because the movie was just the acting was amazing. And it's like
we forget that every little thing we do matters.
Yeah. And we're putting our minds with those things.
Yeah. What you put in is what you come out. I've heard this illustration like a million times, but like you're holding a coffee cup and you get knocked into what comes out is what's in the cup,
Yes.
right?
Oh, so good.
Like, it's that simple. Same with us. What's in our hearts? What are we filling our minds and our hearts with?
Yeah.
That's such a dangerous game. It's such a dangerous game.
And go ahead, Jay.
I think it brings it back to like, who are we surrounding ourselves with? Like,
Yes.
obviously we have to be around the world, but in our free time, like, who are we intentionally spending our time with?
Yeah.
Or what are we intentionally spending our time doing?
Right.
Yeah.
You can't walk through the pig pen and not get dirty.
When I think we have to like ask ourselves, like, am I influencing other people or are they influencing me?
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Like that's really what it all comes down to is like, and I know we had kind of talked about that earlier of it's easier for people to pull us down with them than it is for us to pull them up. But it's like, what am I doing in my day-to-day life? How am I influencing the people around me? Am I?
Yeah.
Or am I just following?
Right.
John 15:18-19 says, if the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. I want to be friends with everybody. And I want everyone to like me and be on good terms with everybody.
Yeah.
But it's not possible. It's just not. And it hurts to know that someone could hate me for what I believe, but it's not me
Yeah.
that they're
It's Christ.
hating.
They hated Christ first.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is taking all of that hate for us. It's not
Yes.
about us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all because of him. And it's like when that does happen, just dust our feet off and move on. Like we can't sit and dwell on it. We're going to lose friends.
Yeah. And,
Like,
and it's going to hurt.
Oh, yeah.
When we're following him and we're standing up for what's right and we're being in the world, but not of the world. I've lost friends just because of things that, it's like, hey, what do you think about homosexuality? And it's like, well, it doesn't really matter what I think about that. What does God's word have to
What
say?
does God
Yes.
say?
And then
Yeah.
it's like, you don't hear from them or they just stop talking to you. And it's like, okay, that's a really hard thing,
Mhm.
but I'm going to keep following Jesus. Like no matter what, he's the one that I want to be close to.
I think Christ is the only perfect person to ever live.
Yeah.
And he was hated. He was
Yeah.
perfect, literally perfect.
Yeah.
And he was hated.
Yes.
I'm far from perfect.
Yeah.
So far from perfect. Hey,
I meant me.
okay. Well, anyway.
Well, I feel like that also goes to, I think it's in Hebrews where the Hebrews writer is talking about how Jesus can relate to everything that we're going through. Like he can relate to everything. And so the fact that he's our high priest and we pray to him or pray through him, he can relate to everything that's
Yes.
going on in our life. And so the fact that we have him to go to and to say when we're going through hard things, when we are being hated by the world, Jesus is that person who can relate to every single thing because
Yeah.
people hated him and they're going to hate us.
I got the verse for you.
Yeah, please,
Hebrews,
please.
Hebrews 4:15.
4. I knew it was in Hebrews somewhere. I was like,
For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses,
Yes.
but who in all points was tempted as we are,
Yeah.
yet without sin.
without sin. Yeah. And I'm like, wow. Just to know that. So comforting.
Sometimes you just feel so alone because you feel like I'm the only one doing this, but Jesus felt all of those things.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I don't know, like Matthew 5, 15 and 16 too, where it's talking about being the light of the world. But when a light walks into a dark room full of darkness, things start to come to light. People don't like that. Like they don't like when things are exposed. It's not
Yes.
fun. If you're joining in, then okay, it doesn't really matter to them. But when you come in and you're like, hey, I'm not going to do those things. They don't like it. They don't like the fact that they're being made to be all alone. Now I'm the one that's,
Yeah.
if Lois isn't going to do it, then, I still want to do it, but she doesn't want to join in with me. Okay. People
It's
are going to stop
hard.
and think.
It's
and
hard to be different.
It's hard to be different.
Yes. And I think of one thing, you say the lights, I think of when a really bright light is on you and your flaws are exposed. We hate that, but it's the same way in our spiritual lives. When what's the verse that says that looking at God's word is like looking into a mirror in James?
Yeah.
I'm trying.
I'll find it.
Yeah, you cover for me. Back to what Jada was saying about how we can feel so alone, though. It makes me think of, I think it's 1 Kings 18, where Elijah was like, I'm alone.
Yeah.
And God was like, what do you mean? There's thousands of other priests right there with you.
And I'm
Or
so
priests, prophets.
I'm so thankful for friendships like these so that we don't have to feel alone. And hopefully by doing this podcast, we make other people feel less alone too.
Yeah. I found that verse, Lois.
There you go.
James chapter 1, verse 23 through 24. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like.
Okay, so question.
Yeah.
Can people see him in me?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
When people look at us, do they see Christ? Makes me think of 1 Corinthians 11:1.
Yeah.
You want to get that, Lydia?
Imitators of me as I am of Christ. Like,
There you go.
That's Paul right there was like to have that, to be able to say, hey, Jada, Lois, Bree, y'all follow me just like I'm following Christ. Like
That's
is
crazy.
That's a big statement.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
that's like, look at everything I'm doing in my life.
Can people
and
follow me and be following Christ?
Yeah.
Like,
Such a good-
that makes me think of kids. Like, I'm around kids so much.
Yeah.
They look at literally everything I do. Not even just kids, though. I mean, like, everyone. I have friends where I'm like, oh, I want to be like them. Or like, I'm just respect them so much.
Or you think about like, we spend a lot of time together. So we say the same like weird things and like,
I know.
it's because we're imitating each other because that's who we're surrounding ourselves with.
Yeah, like you start to pick up on people's mannerisms.
Yes.
Like I worked around the same group of people at work. Like there were like 4 of us girls, and literally every single day we'd go in and just sit and talk. And by like 3 months afterwards, they'd be like, "Lydia, where is this coming from?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "You're starting to sound like us now," just by like little terms and things that they would say. And my mom was like, "Lydia, where did this come from? Like
That
what's
can
up,
be
dog?
dangerous.
Who says
too.
that?"
Wow.
Like yeah, it's like okay. And it can be dangerous, which is why it's so important to make sure that you're hanging out
Who you
with the right
surround
people.
yourself with.
Yes.
Evil company. Going back to it.
And am I reflecting Christ? Like, I mean, it all goes back to that.
So if you keep reading in John 17, the verses 14 through 19 say, I've given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And for their sake, I consecrate myself so that they may also be sanctified in truth. So I think it's so important to note that Jesus is not asking to take us out of the world. He sent us into the world. We are not of the world, and that's so important to remember, but we can't forget Jesus did send us here. So we need to not downplay the fact that he did send us here. So what are we doing with our time while we're here?
Yeah.
And I think that verse also helps explain how to make sure we're in the world and not of it. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. And to be sanctified, it means to be set apart to a sacred purpose. That's exactly how we make sure we're still in the world, but not of it. We have to let the word set us apart.
And why were we sent here? To glorify God.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that need Jesus.
Yeah.
And we have to keep that in perspective. Like, we need to be like Jesus and also share him with those who don't have him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world. We're the
Yes.
ones that are reflecting Christ. And I can't remember, it was a lesson at PTP.
Oh, there we go.
Or maybe it was Kyle Wadley. I don't know, maybe not PTP, maybe camp. But he was like, great, now I forgot. But basically that we might be the only reflection of Christ that anyone ever sees.
Yeah.
It might
Like
be the only Bible people
Right,
ever read.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we aren't reflecting Christ, why would people listen to us
Right.
about Christ?
It's kind of like when you find out that someone's a Christian or you hear them say something like that and you're like, I would never have known.
Yeah.
That is such a sad thing.
I would never have known. Like,
Just
just based
terrifying.
on your actions and how you live your life,
Yeah.
are you reflecting Christ? Am I living like him?
We're all open books especially with like our social medias. I feel like that is our true teller. Back to social media, back on a rant. But social media is such a teller thing of like who someone is,
Yeah.
what they like.
I mean, hey, especially when it comes to dating, like that's something you have to look at now too. I mean, that's a totally different topic, but
Yeah.
the same thing applies.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
true.
I mean, it's our lives are just, we put ourselves out there so much. That's our culture. It's like everybody's watching your every move, and there's always something to say about it. There's always.
And I think because we put everything out there and we can put everything out there, like we need to make sure we're putting things out there that are worth saying.
yeah.
There's like this little kids book that I remember reading whenever I nannied the kids that I watched. And it was called like If Jesus Came to My House, and it was the cutest book. But even if we take that and we apply, if Jesus were on my phone, if Jesus went to work with me every day, if Jesus was in my car with me, like just if he was with us, would he be living like we are?
So yeah, if Jesus were here, would he be living like I'm living?
Yeah.
What would he be spending his time doing?
Mm.
And I think being in the world means that telling the world Jesus isn't someone to hate, and the gospel isn't something that we should ignore. The Bible isn't something to ignore. The church isn't something that we should condemn. Being in the world means telling people how great Jesus is and what he can do for them. And it means teaching others the truth that we've been sanctified in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we have to understand that the world, they're not going to like us. Like we've been saying, they're not going to like us. They're going to hate us. But Jesus was hated. And what I love in, I think it's John 15:19, it says, I choose you out of the world. And I think sometimes that's all the time when I'm in those situations, it's the most comforting thing to know that Jesus, he chose me out of the world. I'm his, like I am his. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. And to me, that's so much comfort when I'm in those hard situations and when I feel alone.
Yeah. He's our friend. Like he's our greatest friend. No matter what we're walking through in life, no matter if we are the only person in the room who's not drinking, not cussing, not doing all these things, we can still be a light for him. Like that kind of goes back to the don't do these things. Okay, but what are you doing?
Yeah.
Am I being that light? Am I, being that person that people can spot out and say, hey, something's different about her. Like, I can't put my finger on it, but there's just something different. And I want to get to know her and just talk to her. And it's like, in the way that we talk, people are going to find that out. Because the more they're around us, they're like, hey, like she doesn't really jump into all the same things that we're talking about. Or whenever we're talking and gossiping about someone, she kind of steps away. Like, are we living like him, and would he be living like us?
People should want to get to know him through us.
Yes.
Like they should be able to see the genuine joy and hope and promise that we have, that we live for.
We should be able to be that bridge to him for other people.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. We're here to go to heaven, and we're here to bring as many people as we can with us. Yeah. There's no hope without heaven.
And we're not going to do that if we are of the world. We can't.
Right.
It's impossible.
And I think that another thing that helps me is thinking of Philippians 3:20. Our citizenship is in heaven. Like that's where we're going. Sometimes when I'm weird, but like when I'm going through a hard situation, I kind of think of myself on this path, and like there's all these like, do you know those movies where like, I think it's like fairy tale movies where like the like branches are moving and like grabbing the person and all those, like that's what I think of. Is like there's this, I'm on this path and it's really hard, and I think of like just all of these things just like coming at me and grabbing me, but I'm standing there being grabbed, but I'm looking at this beautiful place. And that is distracting me from all of these things happening. And I just keep moving forward to that place. Yeah. And so when I think of like, if I'm ever in a situation and I have to take myself out of it, that's what I think of. This isn't my goal. This isn't my home. Yeah. And I'm going towards my home. And what the decision I just made is getting me closer to home. And that's so comforting to me, and it helps me so much.
And like Satan's doing everything that he can to squeeze us into the mold of the world. Like it's not, he's literally doing everything that he can to keep us from living like Jesus. And kind of goes back to Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, like the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Like that is man's all, is to fear God and keep his commandments. And if we're doing that and we're walking in the light, and we're striving to be in the world, but not of the world, like that's all that Jesus has called us to do.
And on the other hand, Satan's whole goal is to make us be of the world.
Yeah.
His whole goal.
Yeah.
So we have this huge influence of like the world, Satan, trying his very best to get us to not be Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have to fight every single day. It's not something that we could just be like, oh, well, I'm not going to hang out with this person. I'm not going. That's something like a daily challenge that we all have. It's never just something where you're like, oh, this is so easy.
Yeah.
This is so easy. We all go through this. Every Christian does. Because if we weren't saved, the devil wouldn't be coming after us so hard. Right. It's because if he already had us, why would he come after us so hard? The people of the world like Satan already has them. He wants Christians. He wants those who are saved.
And when it's hard, like it's reminded me of what Bree said. Jesus chose us. Like he wants us to go and spread his word. He chose us. The world is pulling at us and trying to get us to do everything, but Jesus is choosing us.
Yeah. It's not something we're forced to do. We're not forced to follow him. We're not forced to be a follower of Christ. It's something that we choose, and he chose us for that. And it is possible. I mean, all he asks is for our obedience, not perfection. And it's something that is attainable.
Yeah. Well, anything else you want to say about this one? Being in the world, but not of it? We're good?
I think I learned a lot just from listening to y'all.
Okay. Well, I guess if you have any questions and anybody wants to study the Bible with us or anything, we would absolutely love to have a Bible study. You can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, sisters.podcast on Instagram. Message me personally at Lois at housetohouse.com. We would love to talk about this. Thank you for listening.